I came to Africa in 2020 and I had one ideal in mind in 2020. And let me just give you some context. In 2020, I was 24 years old. Okay. In 2020, I was 24 years old and we came to Africa with our family of 5 back then. We're now a family of 7. But, I've come to understand this difficult thing that I need to tell you about living in Africa. Nobody talks about it and it's very nuanced, okay? I'm gonna give you like a few story times so that you can understand the context behind what I'm saying. It's crazy, it's gonna blow your mind, so stay tuned. I've started to question like what makes some people align with Africa for the long term and what makes others not align with it. What makes some people successful in Africa, what makes some people successful in entrepreneurship, what makes some people successful in marriage, even like in a lot of different things that you see with the human experience. I've been reflecting on this a lot. I'm in my last year of my 20s. I'm about to be 30 years old this year. And so I've been reflecting a lot, thinking about the choices and decisions that I've made that I've been so grateful for, but also looking at my peers and saying like, okay, how come other people aren't able to make these wise decisions? What's the main difference? And so one, I think just life in general, whether you're traveling to Africa, whether you're moving from Ohio to California, from California to Florida, from Florida to Texas, from Texas to the UK, from the UK to Mauritius, from Mauritius to Canada, wherever, we have to look at the psychology of humans and the psychology of how people are raised. Your background in the first 5 years of your life matter big time. And then the next 5 years, 0 to 10, 5 to 10 matter as well. And so I'm going to tell you a story about how I grew up so we can get the full context here. Now, I did not grow up like most Black Americans. I didn't grow up like most Americans, period, actually. The way I grew up was very rare. I was raised in an Ashkenazi Jewish community. I was raised in a very wealthy community, and I was the only Black girl, especially 5 to 18. We stayed in this community mostly the entirety of my entire childhood, 5 to 18. Now we would travel, we would take vacations, we'd go to Florida, my family would go to Colorado, we'd go all over the place, lots of traveling every summer because my dad owned property in 2 places, okay? But essentially, I was very used to traveling, but here's the thing, okay? My grandparents, and I didn't even register this recently until now, I don't know why, I kind of like forgot about it. But my grandparents, when we were little, they would tell us these stories because we would go to our grandparents' house very frequently, both sides of the family. And so on my paternal side, my grandparents would tell us these stories about how they lived in the Philippines with their 2 sons, very young. I think my dad must have been maybe like 5 to 7 years old at that time, and they spent many years living in the Philippines as Americans. So number one, I register with the fact that in my lineage, I'm actually not the first one to leave America, to be quite honest. I thought I was for some time, but I forgot that. I was like, how did I just forget all this? Like, I was talking to my brother about it a few weeks ago, actually, and he reminded me of that, and I'm like, oh yeah, they did live in the Philippines for years and years. So number one, subconsciously, me as a child growing up, I'm basically stuck in this one society, but I keep hearing these stories about the Philippines. I keep hearing stories about how my family was in the Air Force and hearing all these just adventurous stories that I wanted to experience. And then the second part about this is that, to be quite honest with you, and this is like a brutal truth, and it just is what it is, it's reality, I don't necessarily assimilate well with Black America. I never have, because again, I grew up not necessarily right in Black America. I'm Black, of course. I have Black parents, fully 100% African American parents, 100% African American grandparents on both sides. But both sides of my family, very well educated, bachelor's, master's. Some people in my family have PhDs. They own property on the street that I grew up in. Actually, the city in Bexley, the area that I grew up in, only my family and my cousin, because my cousins lived down the street in the same Ashkenazi Jewish community, we were like the only Black people that owned property. aside from my husband's family who lived across the street, who also owned property. But those were like the only 3 families that actually owned property in this city, okay? The only Black families. So that's just context right there for you to understand the psychology of both myself and my husband, because we have similar backgrounds. Not completely the same, but very similar. Because again, we met in high school, knew about each other in middle school, and all the things, okay? And so very similar in that fact. And then my next point was, again, world travel. My family had already world traveled. I had already been traveling as a child, okay? And so this wasn't a foreign concept to me. You throw the third aspect in, the fact that I do not necessarily align with like modern day Black America. I'm more so aligned with like my grandparents' generation, maybe generations previous to that. Very modest, conservative, raised in the church, but raised in different churches: Catholic, Baptist, Methodist, like every denomination, okay? We just went to different ones, okay? Both with some you would have mostly Black, some you would have mostly white, some you would have, you know, and that's pretty much the diversity. Because again, I lived in Ohio, which isn't the most diverse place, to be quite honest. The most diverse you get is Black and white, to be quite honest. But yeah, so that's the context. And then I look at that psychology and how a lot of people, they'll be like, oh, I miss, you know, back home in America. You don't miss this, you don't think about going back. And honestly, I don't, because I don't miss it. I've never looked at myself, even as a child, I never looked at myself as fitting in that society, because on the one side, I did not feel like I fit in with Black American culture. It was very ghetto. It was very much just, you know, if you talk proper the way I did and do, then people ostracize you and they're like, oh, you think you're too good. But then on the flip side, growing up in the Jewish community, clearly I'm the only Black girl at that time. Okay, I wore natural hair, I wore braids. I did not desire to look like anything other than what I was. And so I also didn't completely fit in with that culture either. And so for me in America, it was all, especially as a child, it was never like, oh, this is my home, this is like the place that I feel most aligned. 100% not. It's just reality. I just don't align with American ideals. I just don't, even though I'm an American. So I've always aligned more so with African culture. Now I'm going to lead you into what made me align with African culture. There is a series of events in my life that I'm so grateful for that made me align with African culture. So when we talk about this alignment that I feel towards Africa, I remember being very young, or not even very young, being like in my late teens, going into college, going to work in healthcare. And I remember at 16, 17 years old in healthcare, that's where I started to meet African immigrants. And I was always so curious about them, because to me, they seem very similar to me. Modest, conservative, very family oriented, very similar to the way I grew up, okay? And a lot of them are also very religious. And so I was just curious about them. I would always talk to them, ask them about where they were from, if they're from Cameroon, if they're from Congo. Many of them were actually from Sierra Leone. I still wonder if I'll ever see this sister again to this day, now that I found out I am also Sierra Leonean on my mother's side. But I just get smiles thinking about some of the people, the African immigrants I met. And so I would always talk to them in healthcare. We would strike up conversations. I would tell them like, hey, I'm moving to Africa. They're like, yeah, go ahead. You're going to love it, enjoy it. Make sure when you go for a month. They told me, don't try to travel Africa in a week or two. It's not going to work. Go ahead and go and enjoy it. They said, you don't need to do a DNA test. You need to just go where your heart feels comfortable. If you want to go to Ghana, if you want to go here, you're going to love it. Go ahead and do it. And so, you know, I took that to heart. I was like, great, I'm going to do it. And so this is the psychology of me. My husband's psychology is very, very similar, because he was also meeting people that were at his jobs when he was in his early 20s, late. So when I left America, I just had no intentions of living there full time ever again, to be quite honest. In my mind, it wasn't something that was like far out there. I'm just not a very fearful person. I'm not a person that's very much filled with complaints. I'm very just go with the flow, as you guys can probably tell. Like, I just go with the flow. Chaos could be ensuing around me and I go with the flow. Now, part of that is also my education and training. I've been in healthcare. I had been in healthcare from 16 to 22, 23-ish, okay? I had been in healthcare all that time, and not just any healthcare, like working in emergency settings, seeing code blues happen. People had died like in my vicinity, and I'm holding their hands while they're passing away. And so in healthcare, your demeanor is very much, you need to be able to take stuff around you and to understand the context, to understand who's around you. But I had a great deal of favor early on in my career. At 16, I had went to this career center, and the teacher, she absolutely loved me because I had the highest grades. And guess what? It is not shocking, medical terminology, something that has to do with words and writing. And so she referred me to the nursing home that I worked at 16, 17. And, you know, I was the youngest one there. Then I work at Nationwide Children's, youngest one there. I also decided to pivot into being a fraud analyst before starting my business. Youngest one there. So you're seeing this pattern of just fearlessness. But I think this context is important when we talk about people that follow people that move to Africa. You need to ask yourself, do you have the inventory and the equipment, the mental equipment that's required to succeed? To some degree, we had already succeeded in life in America. And so it wasn't a far stretch to go to Africa. It wasn't like a desperate situation, to be quite honest. It was very much a planned out, a diligent, oh, I want my life to look like this, and that's what it's gonna look like, period type situation. We strategized for years. I first started looking into Africa in 2015, didn't move till 2020, 5 years later. So it wasn't like a spawn of the moment, like, oh my gosh, you know, 1 second. But in 2015, I understood from a cultural perspective, America was not the place I wanted to raise my children, 100%. It was not the place that I wanted to spend my money. And I just could not see myself spending any more, not an hour longer of my life living in that society. I just couldn't, because I just don't align with the people or the values, if I'm quite honest. Even when I meet diaspora that are from the Caribbean, from the UK, from America, to be just honest with you, I just don't resonate with them, to be 100%. I resonate mostly with African immigrants. My favorite clients in our marketing agency, African immigrants. My favorite relationships that I have had with friends have been African immigrants, aside from a few wonderful people I knew in Columbus, Ohio. Shout out to our very tight circle that we had back then. They were fantastic, actually. They were phenomenal, and it was hard to leave them. But again, these were like Ohio people, very chill. They're not like New Yorkers. They're not like Atlanta people. They're not like Miami people. They're not like LA. They're not drama filled. Again, I'm not a super dramatic person. I don't do drama. If you try to debate with me, I will literally just look at you like this, and I'll ignore you because I don't debate. I don't have time. I have too much things to do. I have too much going for me to sit and debate, okay? And so this is the context. So when you're viewing this channel, when you're trying to understand, how did you guys make this move? Why did you make this move? Why do you continue to stay in Africa? And it's because this was a plan that was in motion, to be honest, probably way before I was born. I take it that far and look back at my grandparents, to be honest with you. To my knowledge, they were the first ones to leave America after, you know, our ancestors were captured in slavery. I don't think anybody prior to them had that opportunity, but they took that opportunity. They went to the Philippines. They went all over Southeast Asia. I think they visited the UK as well. They didn't go to Africa, but they had visited those different places, okay? And so I take it from that standpoint. I'm very like psychology based. I'm very analyzing everything, the little things. And again, I'm not one that's filled with complaints. I know there's a lot of talk on YouTube right now about this sister in Ghana who had her house flooded. You know, hopefully she gets everything restored. That looks like an incredibly difficult situation. But, you know, it actually reminded me of my grandparents' house. We would go over there, and the way this house was built, y'all, it's almost embarrassing. I don't know why they built this house like this, but it's one of those things you learn with property. Sometimes life, you have to learn experiences, okay? I think people get on YouTube and get extremely dramatic and like point everything to Africa when some things are just life. Like, that's just, you're gonna go through things in life. So my grandparents' house, I don't know why it was built like this. Y'all not even gonna believe this. It was in a neighborhood, a mostly black neighborhood, with Army veterans, black Army veterans, well-to-do, beautiful houses. They owned all the houses in the neighborhood. All of them were friends when they got home from, you know, the war or whatever. I still don't know how that worked out, that they all ended up in this area. But it's just a regular suburban area. But my grandparents' house is a driveway that goes down. So the house is still level with all the other houses, but for some reason they dug out the driveway to lead into the basement. So you have a house that's level with all the other houses on the street, but my grandparents' house, say this is their house, the driveway goes down to pull into the garage, but the house is up here. So we would, pull into the garage, you'd be going down this slope essentially. And then you get into the garage, you go upstairs and you have the basement, before you go upstairs, you have the basement. Then upstairs, you have like the living room, the family room, the bedrooms in the back. It was a ranch style house, okay? But this driveway, y'all, this driveway would flood. Oh my gosh, it was so bad. We would be coming home from school, me and my cousins, because our grandparents would watch us sometimes for our parents. And so we would be coming home from school. They would pick us up. We did not have to go to any, what do they call those, aftercare programs? No shade, but we didn't have to do that. Our grandparents would pick us up and we would go play with our cousins. Great times. I miss that. Nostalgia all the way. But yeah, it would rain so bad, because remember, Ohio is Tornado Alley. I don't know if it's still this bad, but back then those thunderstorms would get bad and it would flood the entire basement. When I say the entire basement would be flooded, the entire, like, we could not go down the steps. We could not walk down the steps. We could not go anywhere near. They would tell us, back up. We don't want you to get electrocuted. We don't know if the water is going to electrocute you. It would flush out all the stuff they had. They had TVs, they had couches, they had an electronic fireplace. I don't know why they had the electronic fireplace, but that's what they had. Everything would be swooshed out. And it did not just happen once, y'all. That's the crazy part. That's why I'm like, that house, man. It happened 4 to 5 times, okay? It would happen like in these cycles, and it would just get completely flooded in the basement. But I look back at the psychology of my grandparents. Again, these are well-to-do people. They world travel, own their property. People would come to my grandparents if they needed money or needed help. My grandparents also co-owned a church with their friend. Well-to-do people. And something I always remember is that the entire basement would be flooded and they would never complain. They didn't blame it on, oh my God, they sold me a scam house. Oh my God, these people, they hate us. Oh my, They didn't do any of that. They would just say, okay, well, I guess we have to fix it. They would just be so accountable and just like, okay, well, it'll get better. It'll be all right. We just got to find the solution. They'd be like, yeah, we have emergency savings. We have some money over here that we can pull out and we can fix it real quick. Which is so opposite with what we see with Black America today. And this is, again, probably why I don't align with most Black Americans. I'm sorry to tell you. So many people are so drama filled. Like, they survive on drama. Like, they eat drama every day. Like, if they don't create some drama, they're probably going to lose their minds. And I just remember my grandparents just always being so chill about it. They didn't start yelling. They didn't start fighting. They didn't start, telling their neighbors, it's a scam, it's a scam, it's a scam, running up and down the street. They didn't protest up and down the way talking about, they scammed us on this house. It keeps flooding, it keeps flooding. They knew what they were doing. They were trying to get over on it. They didn't say any of that. And I'm telling you, those floods would be so bad. And I'm telling you, there was some expensive furniture down there that got just flushed out, completely flushed out. And I know for a fact the insurance helped for a little while, but when it keeps repeating, those insurance companies, they're like, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to help you. And what could they do? They did not sell the house. They didn't get rid of the house. They kept it. My grandma still lives in it to this day. They've had that house for probably 40 years, if not 50. My granny's old. My granny, she's up there. She's in her 90s. She's, the Most High blessed her with long years. And so these were the role models I had. I had people around me that didn't complain all the time, that were not in these crazy, insane situations. And yet, even when they were tried, and even when they had situations they had to deal with, like that flood, there was just like, us as children, we would look at it like, we would be cracking up like, what is going on? Why does it look like a pool in your basement? Oh my gosh, I look back at those times. That was a trip, y'all. But again, my granny, my grandpa, they were just, it's good. Everything's fine. We gonna be all right. We gonna survive. It's gonna be okay. Like, you gonna make it through. They didn't make a big deal out of it. They weren't like, oh my gosh, we need to get rid of this house. We need to do this. They had a level of stability about them, okay? There's a level of tenacity, peace, stability. And I just don't see that in Black America. I don't see that with the Black diaspora. I see that with African immigrants. I see that with Tanzanians, Kenyans, Congolese, Mauritians. That's why I identify with a lot of immigrant communities and foreigners, because they still have that same approach. And maybe it's something my family picked up during their time abroad, because mind you, again, they spent a good deal of time abroad. They did not stay in America all their lives. They spent a good deal of time abroad. So I don't know if they learned to like be chill and be like that from, their experiences in the Philippines or what have you. But I mean, when you talk about role models, I'm so grateful I had those role models, because I'm starting to understand most people don't have those role models. Most people role models were, arguing, fighting, knocking people out, fighting, so-and-so down the way, talking about, we need to tell the whole truth and the whole, like, just being extra. And I just don't align with being extra, okay? So that's the context and the little rant that I want to go on about what you see in Africa, what you see with the people who make it and people who don't, what you see with people who make it in business even, who make it in marriage even. Can you imagine if you start your business and then you start protesting your business and you go up and down the streets like, nobody told me I would have to pay my contractor? Like, it's foolishness. It's nonsense, And so hopefully this also gives you some inspiration on how you can be more peaceable and peaceful in your life. You're just going to get better outcomes. You're going to use discernment. You're going to have wisdom. You're not just going to be just wasting your time, wasting your money, wasting your mind on just foolish thinking, because that stuff doesn't help you. And it turned out for my grandparents' situation with the flooding, it turned out okay. Eventually the rain, I don't know if it was the city had to fix the sewer systems or what, but it took 4 or 5 bad floods to come through for stuff to be fixed. And it would be only my grandparents' house. It wasn't nobody else's house, because nobody else's house had that dip like that for whatever reason. I don't know what the builder was thinking, y'all, but that dip, man, I wish I had some pictures to show y'all. It was like wild. But you can use situations like that and use discernment and be peaceable. Because in the age of social media, there's this trending thing going on like, you better tell the reality. And it's like, well, what do you define as reality? If you define your life and your reality as everything bad that has ever happened to you in life, you're probably living a miserable existence, to be quite honest with you. Let's just be real. But if your reality is the good things that have happened to your life, and oh, we're resilient, and oh, we found a solution to the problem, then you're going to get good things in life. That's just how it works. That's a universal law that you should understand. So let me know your biggest takeaway from this video. Let me know if you had grandparents like this down below. Let me know if any of your grandparents were in like the Air Force or anything like that. Maybe it's just something with those type of families and those types of careers where they act like that. Let me know down below. And like and share this video if you found value in it. I'll talk to you next time. Shalom, shalom.